We're doing Parshas Tissa with our friend for the year, Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. I want to say at the outset that we are dedicating tonight's shiur to the memory of Mr. Rodney Salkander, Alav Shalom, Reuven Ben Hirsch, whose third yortzeit is tonight, the father of our very dear friend Wayne Salkander, and we're very fond of all the family, I should add, as well. Just would like to begin with an introductory comment. Um, in this week's Sedra, which is dominated by the catastrophic Chet HaEgel, we find that Moshe seeks to evoke divine mercy on the Jewish people, for which they are sorely in need. And among the things which he says is that remember the merit of the forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And this idea of the merit of the forefathers is invoked frequently, but it often comes with a kind of caveat that one can successfully, or let's say meritoriously, invoke the zechus, the greatness of one's ancestors, if he is a worthy scion of those very personalities. To put it in plain English, if someone is righteous, then his righteousness is like aggregated by the righteousness of those who came before him. Rodney Salkander was very devoted to tzarchei tzibur, to communal matters, very devoted to Judaism, to his family. I know because I remember very well, it was a source of great pride for him and for June Lahavdum and Chaim Lachaim, the achievements of their children, the fact that they have followed the path and built on the foundations of their home, and the fact that Wayne is a pillar of our Kehila reflects also to the merit of those who came before him, and especially the merit of his father, as his yortzeit is observed tonight. In this week's Sedra, there's a lot happening in the Sedra. As always, we are constrained by our time limitations tonight, which is a good thing, because otherwise, who knows how long we would go on. Especially our friend Abarbanel often has a lot to say, and I am finding his teachings to be very rewarding and very stimulating, but also it's a commitment in terms of the time and the investment to value and to delight in his extensive creative treatment of the contents of the Torah from week to week. This week's Parasha Tissa has a lot in it, and I want to start with Abarbanel's comments on the opening passage. So if you're with me in the Art Scroll Chumash, it's on page 484, Parshas Tissa. It is Shmos Perek Lamed, that's Exodus chapter 30, verses 11, 12, and onward. So the parsha begins that Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Ki tisas rosh b'nei Israel lifkudehem. When you lift up the heads of the children of Israel, or colloquially, or rather the meaning contextually, the meaning is when you take a census of the children of Israel, lifkudehem, according to their numbers. V'nasnu ish kofer nafsho, each person, each man, shall give an atonement for his soul, Lashem, to God, bifkodosam, when you count them, v'lo yebehem negef bifkodosam, so that there will not be a plague when you count them. Now, this Abarbanel, okay, let's just start with the basis. The basic interpretation is famous, well known to us through Rashi's comments, that the Torah here suggests that there is a certain peril associated with the census. The peril is, to put it to use the term that Rashi uses, Ayin Hara. And actually that Kesher on Shabbos, we're going to speak a lot more about the Ayin Hara, new perspective on the Ayin Hara, the evil eye. Abarbanel does not embrace that approach. The suggestion of the classic approach is that when you count Jews one by one, if you do it that way, you are inviting the Ayin Hara, the evil eye, and it could even lead to a plague, as the Torah here implies, and therefore the method that you should use, says the Torah in the opening passage is use a machzis shekel. Each one shall donate. And what is the kofar nafsho? What is the redemption for the soul? A half shekel coin. A shekel is a certain weight. Half a shekel is a coin of half of that weight. Esrim gerah shekel, machatzis shekel truma l'Hashem. So a shekel is 20 gerah. So half a shekel coin weighs 10 gerah. The weight is reckoned to be about 20 grams, I believe, or thereabouts. So the question is, why does the Torah specify this method? Or I should say, that's not the question. Abarbanel asks several questions. One point he makes, which had not occurred to me previously, and how many times have I read this Parasha? Baruch Hashem over the years, many times, just as you have. The Torah does not instruct, Hashem does not instruct Moshe to count the Jewish people. He does not instruct him to levy a donation, or even if you like, a poll tax, which is what it was really, of half a shekel. The Torah just says, ki tissa. It's not expressed in the terms of a commandment, of an instruction to Moshe, nor a commandment for the future. And Abarbanel says that actually those who count the mitzvahs of the Torah do not enumerate this among the positive commandments, or among the negative commandments, don't count the Jewish people, and if so, there'll be a plague. This is not listed among the Taryag, among the 613 commandments, and it's not even presented in the Torah as a commandment or as an instruction to Moshe. The Torah doesn't say, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta, tell them the following. The Torah just says, take a close look. V'adar Adonai el Moshe lemor, ki tisas rosh b'nei Yisrael, when you count them. Now, it's true that the implication is you should count them, but why doesn't it say so outright? Abarbanel has a really interesting, novel approach here. I've told you many times, probably you knew before you ever tuned into this series, that Don Isaac Abarbanel, well, he was known as Don, by the way, like the term Don, like an Oxford Don, D-O-N. It's also a Spanish term of eminence. It's like sir, probably derives from the word Adon. Adon, which means master in Hebrew. So he's called Don Isaac Abarbanel because he was a statesman, he was a Jewish communal leader, he was a very shrewd and successful, well-regarded businessman, but more than that, he was the finance minister to Ferdinand and Isabella and to the Portuguese crown before him, to the the crown in Naples subsequently. Abarbanel was a financial genius, you could say, and certainly he was very adept and very successful and very savvy when it comes to monetary matters. Abarbanel has a really novel idea here. You might consider it to be too radical. He says that actually the idea of counting the Jewish people was Moshe's idea. Moshe wanted to count them because he anticipated, now that the Jewish people have received the Torah, they are going to enter the land of Israel, or going to approach the land of Israel, going to seek to conquer the land of Israel in accordance with the divine promise, and they need to raise an army for that purpose. Moshe was not expecting, or not relying, I should put it, on divine miraculous intervention. He anticipated the need to raise an army in order to conquer the land. I'm sure that he was anticipating that Hashem would fulfill his promise, the Jewish people would inherit the land, but he was not intending just to waltz in and expecting to get a hero's welcome on the part of the Canaanites. Therefore, he wanted to know, how many fighting men do we have? And he wanted to take a census. There was also another consideration, though. The other consideration was that they had solicited donations. We had in Parshas Truma already 2 weeks ago. Zayitnu, the Jewish people should give a teruma, a donation of all different types of precious metals. Also, they needed wood. Also, they needed dyes. Also, they needed leather. They also needed wool, and they needed a number of different materials. They needed gemstones, and part of what they needed was gold and copper, which they had. They did not have enough silver. Why not? Again, Abarbanel is here speculating. they didn't have enough silver because although the Torah says that the people gave very generously, we will learn next week how the donations were very substantial, and people were alacritous and generous in their giving, but the people were reluctant to give silver coins because they needed the coins for cash, because there were merchants and traders and caravans that were crossing through the Sinai Peninsula, and they wanted to buy provisions from them because even though they had the man, so that sustained them, and even according to rabbinic tradition, that their clothing did not wear out and that sort of thing, they still needed things that they wanted to buy, and therefore they needed cash on hand. They didn't everybody, not everyone had American Express, or maybe the Bedouins, didn't have kind of technological facilities. Of course, I'm being facetious, but that's what Abarbanel says, that the coins, the cash, the silver, they were reluctant to give. So Hashem gave Moshe an Eitzah Tova, financial genius. He said what you should do is spook them with the ayin hara. Tell them, well, I want to count you, but I'm worried about the consequences of counting you, about inviting the well, the jealousy or resentment or whatever it might be, the ayin hara, and therefore Hashem said to Moshe, tell them they've got to give half a shekel. Abravanel says something novel. He says this half a shekel was not a coin that weighed half of the weight of the full shekel. It actually was a shekel coin that they cut in half. Just give half of it. The idea of half was that it's almost like a token amount. In fact, it could be literally a token in the sense that it maybe wasn't legal tender. It was just like a slug. It was just a piece of silver. So that kind of thing, maybe someone had a broken coin anyway, or something coin that was damaged, or that was partly rubbed out. So, he didn't mind parting with it. That's why it says machzis hashekel. And the idea was, it was almost like I won't say a con, but it was a device to say, just give a small amount, half a shekel is not worth that much. But Hashem said to Moshe, but you've got 600,000 of them. So you've got weight of 300,000 shkalim. You'll have all the silver you need. And that's exactly what it was. Because the Mefarshim make a calculation that the silver that was needed for the Mishkan, the Adanim, especially the sockets at the base of the Mishkan, were provided by the 300,000 shkalim, that is to say, 600,000 half shkalim that were provided by the people. With this, Abravanel explains why, or he answers the question, he poses the question, and as follows, he says that, well, perhaps I won't bother to read you the question, but I'll just explain further, like how it fits in with the whole picture that he creates. He maintains that it's not so that there will be a magefa, there'll be a plague if you don't use this method. Even though the Torah implies it, but he says, how can it be that something which the Torah commands, there's be a plague as a result of keeping the commandment? If Hashem instructs Moshe to count the people, so it cannot be the case that a magefa will follow. And he asked the question which many of the Mefarshim raised, the example of King David. He counted the people and there was a plague. But if you think about it, or if you look it up in the book of Samuel, you'll find that yes, there was a plague, but the prophet, the prophet gave King David a choice of three forms of punishment that would follow. The problem is that King David didn't count them for a valid reason or for a compelling reason, certainly not at the divine command. He counted them just for his own vanity. How many Jewish people are under his control? He's the king over how many subjects? So it wasn't for a valid reason. And as a result, he was told by the prophet, what you've done is wrong, you've got a choice of three forms of punishment. See, he chose the punishment of the plague of the Jewish people. What if he had chosen a different punishment? Then there would have been no plague. It was his choice to select that as the option. He says, furthermore, Saul counted the people. There was no plague then. We find other examples where there was no plague. And although the halacha is that you're not supposed to count Jews. And that's why even when we count for a minyan, we say Hoshia es amecha vareches nachlasecha, a pasuk with 10 words. So we can, instead of counting how many Jews here, one, two, three, we say Hoshia es amecha, etc. But says Abravanel, there's no need for that, that the Torah doesn't specify this machzis hashekel as in the future, and even says later on in Bamidbar when the Torah counts them, it doesn't say anything about machzis hashekel. So according to Rashi, all of these methods of counting involve the half shekel donation. Abravanel says it's not so. The half shekel donation was only on this occasion because they needed to raise the money, and it was Hashem's suggestion to Moshe. This is a great fundraising technique. I think this is financial genius on the part of Abravanel. And again, as I said, you can see how savvy he was in financial matters. Um, and this is his interpretation. And with that, we'll go on to the other or a subsequent dramatic event which actually occupies the main part of our parsha this week, and that is the Chet HaEgel. Now, this sin of the golden calf has many aspects, and again, Abravanel writes at considerable length. I just want to share with you his interpretation of an expression which we find here and elsewhere, and that is Am Kishe Oref. The Jewish people are described as a stiff-necked people. Am Kishe Oref. Kishe is like kasher. Oref is neck, a stiff-necked people. The back of the throat is in the front, the back is the neck, and that's called oref. If you like, probably anatomically, the oref really refers to that which links the head to the shoulders. Those tendons and that sort of thing. That's called oref. What is so? Abravanel asks, why are the Jewish people called Am Kishay Orav? Why does Moshe say when in his prayer to God, forgive them or give them, another chance, or possibly even um, uh, act towards them with exceptional forbearance, with uh, like understanding because they are Am Kishay Oref. So Abravanel says, why is making the golden calf? Does Moshe describe them that behavior as Kishay Oref? We would have thought it would be considered not just stiff-necked behavior, but rebellious behavior or treacherous behavior. Like we have the famous metaphor in the Medrash that the Jewish people who stood at Har Sinai and were party to that cosmic marriage celebration between the Almighty Himself and the Jewish people, in which Klal Yisrael are the bride and Hashem himself is the bridegroom, and the Torah, so to speak, or the luchos are the consideration of the Kesef Kiddushin, and all of this elaborate metaphor, and then the bride who runs off with the best man or the worst man under the chuppah, and she leaves her groom in the lurch. It's a form of betrayal of the commitment. They said Na'aseh v'nishma, they accepted the Torah, and as I said, they were elevated to that exalted level of prophecy, and 40 days later, they're worshiping the golden calf. So much needs to be said about it, although we don't have time for tonight, and Abravanel certainly, again, has a fascinating approach, but for the purposes of the time we have together still, I want to just focus on that expression, Am Kishay. And he asks that the Jewish people can be likened to a licentious bride, to an adulterous bride. to say that they're simply Kishay Oref doesn't seem to strike the right note to describe the circumstances. Ibn Ezra, he quotes Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra. He says that Kishay Oref is like a person who is like headstrong. And that's what we've called our shir tonight, actually, headstrong people, rather than like attributing or describing their behavior as stiff-necked. It's more like the Jewish people are headstrong. They have an idea and they just run with it without taking account other considerations. He says, "Vaharav Avraham ben Ezra Pireshu haholech litzarko b'merutza," like a person who's rushing off to his destination. V'lo yashuv oref, he won't turn around. Lekarei elav, someone calls him and he just ignores the one who is calling him. Maybe he ignores a warning. Maybe he ignores an opportunity. Maybe he ignores a reminder. Maybe he ignores his beloved. Maybe he ignores someone to whom he is responsible. And in a kind of fit of callousness and pursuit of his own interest, he just rushes off and he won't turn around when someone calls him. Abarbanel says something along those lines. Says, he says, it's like a person who looks ahead and he doesn't look around. Person has eyes which give him peripheral vision up to an extent. But in order for a person to really be aware of his surroundings, he's got to make use of his neck, which enables him to turn, to look in different directions. So I'm looking at the screen and I'm turning around. Everyone can do that unless you have a sore neck or something like that. But Hashem has created a man and a woman and the human race, some animals yes, some animals not, with the capacity to turn their heads in order to be aware, to be alert, to be conscious of what is around him and to be aware possibly of danger or threat that approaches him or that may be creeping up on him. He says, Am Kishay Oref is like a nation that is tunnel vision. It means that they're only looking at one thing, maybe in a one-dimensional way. They're not surveying the full field of vision. They are closing themselves off to sources of stimuli, of information, which can be beneficial, which may be essential for them. Am Kishay Oref, he says the Jewish people have acted in a way which is like single-minded, and their grasp or their appreciation of what is around them has therefore been like undermined or limited. Misha Arfo Kasheva Kaved, if his neck is stiff and heavy, Lo Yuchal Lahaniat Savaro, he can't turn his neck properly. Latiko Mitzad El Tzad, to go from one side to the other. And therefore he won't be aware or alert to that which may come upon him, because he's only looking just ahead of him. But what about on the sides? What about behind him? What about a threat or a peril that approaches him from? Rabos Varaos. So Moshe was saying to Hashem, the Jewish people, perhaps, and he does develop this further, they were influenced, they were habituated by their time in Egypt. And maybe it was the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, who have incited them, who have urged them, who have almost, you could say, lured them into the worship of the golden calf. But the Jewish people themselves also were for so long in Egypt, and they were subject to that influence. So yes, they had this revelation, and yes, they were elevated to such a high level, and yes, they can be likened to a bride under the chuppah, but after a while, maybe very quickly, the habits and the mindset of generations begins to set in, and their consciousness, their awareness of the divine mission that has been placed upon them has been lost, or at least they've overlooked it. They are Kishay Oref. I'd just like to add a further idea, last idea, that I saw many years ago in the writings of Maharal. Maharal of Prague it remains in Jewish history, Jewish folklore as well, one of the most prominent thinkers, figures. Of course, he's known as a wonder worker as well, and his philosophy remains very influential to this day. And uh, Maharal, as I say, is like a folk hero to the Jewish people in terms of the Golem legend and many other legends as well, and Lahavdil even to the Czech people also. And the reason I mention that is that he records in one of his books how he was a kind of discussant of a particular Catholic bishop. I think his name was Sylvester, if I remember correctly. And he describes a dialogue that he had with him. And the Catholic cleric, of course, always seeking to win over or almost to defeat the Jewish people in some kind of theological debate, he said, you know, your own scriptures, your own great lawgiver Moses describes you, the Jewish people, as stiff-necked. And you are frequently criticized for it, and you are almost condemned. It's regarded as your one of your weaknesses. And of course, what he's getting at is that you need to open your eyes to the new religion that we've been touting for the last in the days of Maharal about 1600 years. And why are the you Jews still so obdurate and so unwilling to see the light? Um, and Maharal answered in the following interesting way. He said, it's true that the Jewish people are criticized as Am Kishei Oref, a stiff-necked people, but it is also our greatness. He said, if we were not a stiff-necked people, then we would have long ago succumbed to the pressure or the persecution or maybe the blandishments of Christianity. It's only because we have that quality of being not easily dissuaded. And that's why I've called our little shir tonight headstrong. The Jewish people are headstrong. Even though probably that term is often used as a criticism, and Maharal does not dispute that much of the time it is presented. It's not considered to be an admirable feature of the Jewish people, but at the same time, there is an upside to it. Because it's only our stiff-neckedness which prevents us, or I should say, which enables us to remain resolute and unyielding in our devotion to Hashem. So it is true that in our Parasha, the Jewish people are condemned as Am Kishei Orev, but that same quality also reflects our greatness and our, again, I wouldn't say tunnel vision, but our refusal to be led astray or to be tempted to abandon our service of Hashem and our recognition of our mission in the world as those who have received the Torah to pursue or to be like seduced by so many of the other opportunities that abound. Of course, no doubt, those enticements and those temptations are always going to be a source of danger for us. As any temptation by its very nature is a threat to a person who has higher values or higher aspirations, but collectively, historically, the Jewish people retain our devotion to Hashem even after 3,300 years after giving the Torah. And even though, yes, we did go astray after the golden calf on that occasion, but when Moshe criticizes the Jewish people, he also says to Hashem, you know what? The Jewish people are single-minded. They're Am Kishei Oref. So yes, they've tripped up on this occasion, but in the long run, in the long road of Jewish history and of human history, the Jewish people will retain that headstrong commitment, and they will not be derailed, and they will not sell out, and they will not abandon their relationship with Hashem in favor of any of the other religions or value systems which have sought to dissuade us and to tempt us since that time. So we've seen some novel thoughts, as always, from our friend Abarbanel, whether it's from the finances or from the theology as well, with a little postscript from Maharal of Prague. Thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful Shabbos.